tonight I'm going to skip the usual opening. No sweeping comparison. No rapid-fire list of shocking facts designed to jolt you awake before slowly putting you back down. Tonight I'm starting with one thing. Cold. Not the cold of a modern bedroom with a broken radiator. Not the cold of forgetting your jacket. Not even the cold of that camping trip where you knew, going in, that you'd be uncomfortable and you could leave whenever you wanted. I mean the cold that wakes you at 2 a.m. in a room the size of a large closet, shared with 4 other people in a building shared with 60, on a street in Whitechapel, London, in November 1867. The kind of cold that doesn't knock, doesn't wait, comes through every gap in every wall and every crack in every floorboard all at once, like it has been saving itself up for you specifically. The coal ran out yesterday. You knew it was coming. You'd been stretching the last of it for 3 days, 2 lumps at a time, watching the glow sink faster than it should, because cheap coal is half dust and the dust barely catches, and when it does catch, it gives maybe a quarter of the heat of the real stuff. The brazier is cold now, has been since sometime around midnight, and the room has become whatever temperature the outside is, which tonight is not far above freezing. Your eyes open. You already know what's coming before your mind has finished waking up. Your body has already done the calculation. Every inch of skin exposed above the blanket reports back the same number. Bad. Every muscle tightens involuntarily, the way they do when warmth is being conserved rather than felt. You lie there for a moment. Just a moment. Then you accept it, because there's nothing else to do. Welcome to Flower and Dean Street, Whitechapel, London, November the 14th, 1867. And honestly, I don't know if anyone actually listens to this while trying to sleep, or if you're all just people who like the idea of suffering through someone else's 19th century while wrapped in your own duvets. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable, because tonight we're living something different. The room is small. When I say small, I need you to understand what that means in the context of Whitechapel in 1867. Not small like a studio apartment, not small like a college dorm room, small like, if you lie down and stretch out, your feet touch the wall. Small like, there is one window, and it faces a wall 4 feet away, and the light that comes through it is mostly the colour of old dishwater. The room is approximately 11 feet by 9. That's slightly larger than a double bed, as in, if you laid a double mattress down on the floor, you'd have maybe 18 inches of clearance on each side. In this room, you live. You and Thomas, your brother, 16 years old, currently curled into himself on his side of the straw mattress like a threatened hedgehog, and Mrs. Hannigan, who occupies the far corner behind a length of sacking she's nailed to a rafter to give herself the illusion of privacy. Mrs. Hannigan is 62 and came from County Cork in 1848 and has lived in this city for nearly 20 years and never once stopped looking like she expected to leave any day now. She pays 4 shillings a month for her corner. You pay 6 shillings for the rest. 10 shillings a month. For 11 feet by 9 feet of space in a building on Flower and Dean Street that has been subdivided and re-subdivided so many times that the original rooms no longer exist. Just partitions, cheap wood and cheaper plaster, cutting what used to be 2-room apartments into 4 and 6, and in one case 8 separate spaces, each one smaller than the last, each one housing more people than it was ever meant to contain. The building has 5 floors. Somewhere between 50 and 60 people live in it, depending on who's subletting to whom and how many people are sleeping in the stairwells tonight. You know the stairwells, because you use them every day. They smell like damp wood and old urine, and the cabbage that Mrs. Brodie on the second floor seems to boil constantly, regardless of season or time of day. But right now, in the dark at 2 a.m, with the cold pressing down on everything, all of this is just context. The context is you're cold and you have no coal, and there is a bucket that should contain coal sitting empty by the brazier, and the brazier is dead, and you cannot go back to sleep. You sit up. The blanket falls away from your shoulders, and the cold hits your upper body immediately. A sharp physical shock, like stepping into water that's colder than you expected. Your breath mists in front of your face. You can see it, just barely, in the faint greyish light coming through the window from the gas lamp in the street below. There's a gas lamp, yes. Whitechapel has had gas lighting since the 1820s. This is not the absolute darkness of a medieval city. But the light is dim, and it's outside, and it barely reaches your window, which is halfway up a wall in a building that crowds against the street so closely that the glass is perpetually filmed with the coal smoke and horse dust and human exhalation of about 500,000 people living on top of each other. The floor under your feet when you stand is cold enough that it hurts, not dramatically, not like stepping on glass, but a deep, persistent ache that starts in your soles and works its way up to your ankles. The floorboards have gaps between them. Not big gaps, but enough. The room below has been empty for a week since the Murphys were evicted, and whatever warmth used to rise from it is gone. You stand in the centre of the room and breathe, and your breath clouds and disperses. Thomas doesn't wake. He's got the deeper half of the blanket and the metabolism of a teenager, and he can apparently sleep through anything short of a direct physical intervention. You've considered it. Not tonight. Mrs. Hannigan is quiet behind her sacking. You pull on your second layer, a rough wool shawl that you keep folded at the foot of the mattress precisely for moments like this, and wrap it around your shoulders and upper body and try to think. The coal costs 6pence for a small sack, half the weight of the sacks it's supposed to be, because the coal merchant on Commercial Street mixes in slack and dust, and everyone knows it, and everyone still buys from him because he's the nearest, and because at this hour you're not going anywhere near the docks to try to find someone selling the real thing out of a barrow. You have 10pence. That is everything you have until Friday, which is 4 days away. And here is your problem. 6pence for coal leaves you 4pence. 4pence is bread. Bread is what gets you and Thomas through to Friday when you collect your wages from Bryant and Mays. No coal, and you are cold but fed. Coal, and you are warm but down to the end of things. You stand there in the dark room in November in 1867, and you run the arithmetic the way you've been running it every day for the past 3 months, and the numbers come out the same every time. They don't come out. They just stop somewhere short of enough. Let me tell you about Bryant and Mays. You dip matches. That's the job. White phosphorus matches, which Bryant and Mays have been making since 1861 at their factory in Bow, a little east of where you're standing right now. The work is exactly what it sounds like. You sit at a long bench with 20 other girls, and you take wooden splints from the hopper to your left, dip them into the phosphorus paste in the tray in front of you, lay them carefully on the drying rack to your right, take another handful of splints, dip, lay, take, dip, lay. 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 6 shillings, 6 shillings a week. That's roughly what a skilled tradesman earns in a day. A lawyer might earn it in an hour. The factory manager earns more in a week than you will earn in a year. But 6 shillings is what there is. So 6 shillings is what you work for. You came to London 3 years ago from a village outside Sligo in the west of Ireland. Your parents had died. Typhus, then the consequences of typhus, which is to say the slow collapse that happens when you lose the people holding everything else together. And Thomas was 13 and needed feeding, and there was nothing in Sligo in 1864 that could feed him. Someone told you about London, about the factories, about how if you were willing to work, really willing, no hesitation, you could make enough to live. They weren't wrong exactly. They just left out some important details about what live meant. The smell of the room reaches you now that you've been awake long enough for your nose to stop ignoring it. Rooms like this have layers of smell, not the dramatic assault of the street outside. That's a different thing entirely, and we'll get to it, but a close, inhabited biological smell. Sweat mostly. 3 people sleeping in a small space generate a specific warmth that is the closest thing to animal warmth this room ever achieves, and that warmth carries with it the smell of bodies that have worked all day and washed partially and incompletely. There's the straw in the mattress, old straw, slightly damp from the condensation that forms on the walls, where the cold meets whatever warmth 3 sleeping bodies can produce. There's the faint chemical ghost of phosphorus that you carry home from the factory in your hair and your skin, and that you can never quite scrub out no matter how carefully you wash your hands. You've stopped noticing that one. The other girls have told you that you stopped noticing it after a few months. They were right. Underneath all of that, fainter but always there, the smell of the building itself. Old wood. The mould that grows in the corners near the ceiling where the plaster has cracked and the water gets in when it rains hard. The smell of the room below, even though it's empty now. Some things leave an imprint even when the people who made them are gone, and from outside, through the gaps in the window frame that you've stuffed with rags but not quite successfully, the street. London streets in 1867 have a smell that deserves its own chapter. Horse manure, first and most immediately. There are approximately 300,000 horses working in London at any given time, and they produce, I'll spare you the exact calculation, but the scale of it is genuinely staggering. The crossing sweepers make their living clearing it. The ones who collect it wholesale sell it to market gardens outside the city. It's an economy of its own. Right now, in November, with the cold keeping the smell slightly suppressed, it's almost bearable. Come August, it is not. Underneath the horse manure, coal smoke. Every fireplace in every house in this city burning coal, the smoke rising, and settling back down, coating everything with a fine black film. The fog that London is famous for isn't fog, not exactly. It's coal smoke mixed with moisture. They call it the particular. It comes in through the cracks the same way the cold does. You blow your nose in the morning and what comes out is black. Underneath the coal smoke, the river. The Thames is 1.5 miles south of Flower and Dean Street, but the smell of it reaches everywhere. Not a clean water smell, not even an ocean smell. The smell of a river that serves simultaneously as the main water supply and the main sewer for the largest city in the world. The great stink of 1858 prompted Parliament, famously located right on the river, to finally do something about it. And Bazalgette's sewers are being built right now, as you stand in your room shivering, tunnelled under London streets in what is genuinely one of the great engineering achievements of the century. But they won't be finished for another few years, and in the meantime the Thames is the Thames. You know this smell. You've stopped separating it from all the others. It's just the air of the city, the air of your life, You make a decision, not about the coal, not yet. The coal decision is made by the tenpence and cannot be unmade. What you decide is, you are not going back to sleep in this cold, in this dark, lying awake, running the arithmetic again and again, and getting the same answer. You are going outside. This requires more thought than it sounds like it requires. Going outside in Whitechapel at 2 in the morning in 1867 is not the same as going outside anywhere in the world at 2 in the morning in the present day. The streets are not empty. They are never empty. Not in this part of London, not at any hour. But the population of the streets at 2 in the morning is a specific one, and you know it, and you navigate it accordingly. You pull on your boots. The leather is stiff with cold, and the laces are difficult to manage with fingers that are already losing their dexterity. You work at them methodically, not rushing, because rushing means fumbling, and fumbling means sitting in the cold longer. Your coat goes on over the shawl. The coat is brown wool, thick enough to mean something, thin enough to remind you of what you're dealing with when you step outside. You bought it second-hand from the stall on Petticoat Lane 18 months ago for 1.9, and it was worth every penny, and you hope it lasts another winter because you cannot afford to replace it. You check the pocket. The tenpence is there. The small folded piece of paper with the address of the charity woman on Hanbury Street is there. You've been meaning to go back since she told you about the soup on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but the factory hours don't always permit Tuesday evenings, and this is not Tuesday. You look at Thomas, still asleep, still curled. You pull the blanket up to cover more of his shoulder, which has emerged from it in the way that sleeping people's shoulders always seem to emerge from covers, as if by their own will. He doesn't wake. Good. You cross to the door, 4 steps maximum in this room, and ease it open and step out into the corridor. The corridor of the building on Flower and Dean Street is its own world. The corridor is dark, not completely. There's a candle stub in a tin holder at the top of the stairs, paid for collectively by the residents of the 3rd floor, which means it's always half the size it should be and always burning down faster than anyone expected. Tonight it's barely alight. The flame trembles in the draught from the stairwell. The smell in the corridor is stronger than in your room. Your room has you and Thomas and Mrs. Hannigan. The corridor has everyone. Every door on this floor is closed. Behind each one, people are sleeping or trying to sleep, or doing what people do when they cannot sleep in November in a room with no coal. There are 14 doors on this floor. Behind them, at a conservative estimate, are between 40 and 50 people. Men, women, children. Workers, mostly. Factory hands and street sellers and casual labourers, and women who take in washing, and girls who work in the small workshops that make matchboxes and cigarettes and pins and buttons and every other small manufactured thing that the Victorian economy depends on. You know most of their names. You know which families are managing and which ones are not. You know that the Connells in the back room on the left are 3 weeks behind on rent, and that Mr. Connell has been out of work since the dock layoffs, and that his wife has been taking in mending, and that together they have 5 children, and that the mending does not cover 5 children at 3p a shirt. You know that the woman at the end of the corridor, Agnes, who everyone calls Aggie, is not a match girl or a seamstress or a washerwoman, and that she goes out late and comes back in the early morning, and that nobody says anything about this because everyone needs to make rent somehow, and Aggie is very quiet and very kind. And once, when Thomas was sick with a fever for a week, she brought broth without being asked. This is the thing about Flower and Dean Street in 1867, that the reformers and the journalists and the philanthropists who come here to write about the conditions don't always capture when they go back and put it all down on paper. It isn't just desperation, it is also, woven through the desperation, inseparable from it, a kind of dense, practical intimacy. Everyone knows everyone's business because the walls are 4 inches thick and the ears are right next to the walls. Everyone has seen everyone at their worst. Everyone has borrowed from and lent to and been annoyed by and been grateful for everyone else. It's not nice exactly. Nice requires a certain amount of comfort and space, and there is not enough of either. But it is something that the philosophers who write about urban poverty from the outside sometimes miss entirely. You ease past the candle stub on the 3rd floor landing and start down the stairs. The staircase of a building like this one, in 1867, is a journey. Each step is worn down in the centre to a slight concavity from years of feet. The banister wobbles. The wall alongside it has been touched so many times that the plaster is gone in a stripe at hand height, replaced by the dark oil of human palms over decades. The building is old, 40 years at least, probably more. It was built as a decent enough lodging house for working people. Small rooms, yes, but 1 family per room, not 5 and 6 and 8. Then the neighbourhood shifted, and the economics shifted with it, and the landlord subdivided, and the density increased, and the maintenance decreased, and here you are. Your landlord is Mr. Briggs. Mr. Briggs is a thin man with watchful eyes and a coat that is conspicuously better than anyone else's. Coat on Flower and Dean Street. He comes on the 1st of the month to collect. He is never late for this. He is frequently late to fix anything. The window on the 2nd floor landing has been broken since August. The gap has been stuffed with newspaper, which worked reasonably well in September and is doing considerably less well in November. When the wind comes from the east, which it does several times a week in autumn, the newspaper rustles and occasionally falls out and the cold comes through like a fist. Mr. Briggs, when informed of this in September, said he'd have someone look at it. In October he said the same thing. You stopped asking. The building itself is owned by a man named Harrington, who lives in a house in Highbury and who owns several such buildings across Whitechapel and Spitalfields, and whose name you know only because Mrs. Hannigan once showed you the deed of trust she found folded inside an old floorboard when she moved in, and the name Harrington was on it. Mr. Harrington presumably does not think about Flower and Dean Street very often. Mr. Harrington pays Mr. Briggs to manage the property, which means Mr. Briggs pays Mr. Harrington a fixed rent and keeps whatever is left over after that, which means Mr. Briggs's interest is in collecting as much as possible and spending as little as possible, which you understand logically and resent absolutely. The ground floor. The front door is heavy and fits badly in its frame, and requires a specific combination of force and angle to open. You've got the combination memorized. Left shoulder, slight lift on the latch, push with your right hip. The door swings open, and the street hits you. Flower and Dean Street, at 2 in the morning in November 1867, smells like the 19th century concentrated. The cold has suppressed some of it. In summer, you would be hit by the full force immediately. But what remains is still enough to stop you for a moment on the threshold while your senses adjust. Horse dung, yes, but something sharper over it. The coal smoke from the night fires still burning in the lodging houses across the street, where 8 or 10 people huddle around a common room hearth, for which they each pay 2d a night. The gas lamp on the corner casts its yellowish light over the cobblestones, which are wet from an earlier rain. the puddles between them reflecting the flame in small wavering ovals. A dog is investigating something at the base of the lamppost. It looks up at you briefly, assessingly, and goes back to its investigation. Down the street to your left, a man is sitting on the step of a doorway with his back against the door and his chin on his chest. Sleeping, probably, or drunk, or some combination of both. He has a coat on that is not thick enough for November, and his hands are folded between his knees for warmth. To your right, further down, voices. Low, not threatening. The murmur of two people in conversation. You can't see who they are in. The dark beyond the lamp. A cat crosses the street with the particular sideways lope of a London stray that has decided it owns everything it surveys. You step out. The cold wraps around your legs immediately. Your skirt is wool but not thick, and you pull the coat tighter across your chest and start walking. You're going to the coal merchant, specifically to the coal merchant's yard on Commercial Street. The coal merchant's yard is a 10-minute walk. At 2 a.m. in November, it will not be open. You know this. You're not going to buy coal at 2 a.m. What you're going to do is think while you walk, because thinking while lying still in a cold room produces only the same thoughts in the same loop, and walking opens something up. This is not a strategy you articulate to yourself. You just do it. You've been doing it for 3 years, since you arrived in London with Thomas, and a small bag of clothes and a letter of introduction to a woman on Hanbury Street who turned out to have moved 6 months earlier. Walking is the city's free therapy. Brick Lane to your right as you come out onto Commercial Street. The name means exactly what it meant 200 years ago. This was the lane where the brickmakers lived and worked, where the kilns stood before the city swallowed them. Now it's the heart of the Spitalfields textile district, where the silk weavers who came from France 2 centuries ago were replaced by Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe who were replaced by and now exist alongside the Irish who came after the famine and the English workers pushed east by the economics of the centre city. This is what East London is in 1867. The place the city sends what it can't accommodate anywhere else. Commercial Street is wider than Flower and Dean Street, wide enough for 2 carts to pass each other, which is the standard of a major thoroughfare in this part of London. The gas lamps are more frequent here. The street is genuinely not empty. A night cart passes, its 2-horse team plodding with the resigned efficiency of animals that have made this exact journey hundreds of times. The driver hunched on his box, wrapped in a canvas coat against the cold. Night carts collect what the daytime streets produce. Night soil, the euphemism for human waste, from the privies shared between multiple buildings, carted off to be sold to farmers and market gardeners outside the city. It's a necessary function. It's one of the reasons Whitechapel smells the way it does at night, when the carts are making their rounds. You give the cart wide berth. The driver doesn't look at you. The coal merchant's yard is locked, as expected. You stand in front of the gates for a moment just to do something with your presence. The gates are wooden, tall, set between 2 brick walls. Above the wall on the left you can see the shapes of coal heaps in the yard, mounds of black against the slightly less black sky. The yard? Dog is quiet, either asleep or not present. You look at the price board nailed to the gate. Best house coal, 1 shilling per hundredweight. Seconds, 10 pence per hundredweight. Slack, dust, 4 pence per stone. A hundredweight is 112 pounds. You cannot carry a hundredweight. The small sack you usually buy is about £20 and costs 6 pence for the seconds. The merchant adjusts the price and the size based on what the customer looks like they can afford, which is its own kind of transaction, and not always a favourable one. 4p for a stone of slack. A stone is £14. You could carry that. Slack burns poorly and dirty and fills the room with more smoke than heat. But it burns. You are doing the arithmetic again. The 10p in your pocket. A stone of slack for 4p. That leaves 6p. 6p is bread for 2 days. Possibly 3 if you're careful. But you also need to pay Mrs. Hannigan for the corner of the room she lends you on. Certain nights when the building is being watched and she hasn't asked you for anything in weeks, which means she's due, and you don't like being in debt to anyone. You stand at the gate in the cold and do the arithmetic, and the arithmetic ends the same way it always does. Short. You turn away from the gate and start walking again. Not home, not yet. Your body isn't ready to go back to the room and lie down in the cold and wait for morning. South on Commercial Street, past the Spitalfields Market. Closed, the stalls empty and skeletal in the dark, the smell of vegetables and meat and damp wood still hanging in the air from the day. And past Christchurch Spitalfields on your left, which is the largest and most magnificent building in this part of London, and which sits at the end of Commercial Street like a reproach to everything around it. Nicholas Hawksmoor designed it, completed in 1729, 150 feet from the ground to the top of the spire, which you can see from most of Whitechapel on a clear day. The stone is Portland limestone, the same stone they use for St. Paul's, and it's kept clean, or cleaner than most things in Spitalfields, because the churchwardens pay for it. The church is surrounded by a churchyard. The churchyard has graves in it, old graves, many of them anonymous or illegible now, the inscriptions worn smooth by a century of London air. The Huguenot weavers who built the fine houses around it in the 1720s and 1730s, when Spitalfields was a prosperous district for skilled craftsmen, the families who declined with the trade, generation after generation. Some of the people in those graves were not much different from you. Different century, different country of origin, same calculation. Move to London, find work, survive. Some of them managed it, some of them didn't. There is a woman sitting on one of the benches inside the churchyard gate. You almost don't see her. She's very still, dark coat, head down. Then she moves slightly and you see she's not sleeping. She's watching the street. Her eyes meet yours for a moment as you pass. She's about your age. Her coat is better than yours. You nod. She nods. You walk on. Let me tell you something about walking in East London in 1867 that the daylight version of the city doesn't give you. In the day, Whitechapel is noise and motion and commerce. The street sellers with their barrows, the factory girls walking in groups, the men crowding around the hiring gates of the docks in the morning, the children running between the adults' legs, the constant clatter and shout of a city working at full capacity. At night, the working city sleeps. What's left is everything the working city keeps underneath. The beggars who spend the daylight hours find in positions of maximum visibility move to positions of minimum exposure when the temperature drops. You know where they go. The bakers' alleys, where the ovens run through the night and the walls are warm to the touch, where you can press your back against the brick and feel the residual heat working through your coat. You've done it yourself. You're not ashamed of it. The common lodging houses, the ones on Flower and Dean Street itself, and on Thrall Street, and on Dorset Street, are full. their windows yellowed with light and the sound of many people packed together drifting out through the walls. They're not comfortable, those places. 6 or 8 to a bed, if there are beds. More often rough wooden bunks stacked 3 high, bodies above and below and beside you. You pay 2p a night and you get a roof and warmth from proximity. You've slept in them before, when the rent came due and took everything. When you first arrived and didn't know where else to go. There is a hierarchy even in the common lodging houses. The ones that charge 3p are better than the ones that charge 2p. The ones that charge 2p are better than the ones that charge a penny. At a penny a night, you sleep on the floor with everyone else who has a penny, and the floor is the floor of a Whitechapel common lodging house, which is not something that needs further description. You have a room. You have your own room, shared, yes, crowded, yes, cold tonight. But your room, this is something. This is not nothing. You pass a boy sleeping in a doorway, maybe 12 years old, curled around himself, one arm under his head as a pillow. He has no coat. He has a jacket, thin, summer weight, buttoned all the way up. You stop. You stand there in the street for a moment, your 10p in your pocket, thinking about the coal and the bread and Mrs. Hannigan's debt and the boy's jacket. You reach into your pocket, you take out a penny, you put it on the ground next to his hand where he'll see it when he wakes up. A penny. 1 penny out of 10. You walk away before you can think about it too much. 9p now. 9p and 3 farthings stand between you and the edge. You have been at the edge before. You know what the edge looks like. You know the particular anxiety of opening the week on Monday with the arithmetic already failing. Not yet, but by Thursday, by Friday, by the moment before the wages come in. Thomas doesn't know about the arithmetic. You've made sure of it. He's 16 and he's working too, running errands for the market on Saturdays, doing odd jobs when they come up. But his earnings are small and irregular, and you've always made sure he had food, and you've absorbed whatever shortfall there was into your own calculations without telling him. He's your brother. He's 16. He doesn't need to know. Your mother, if she were here, which she isn't, which she hasn't been for 3 years, your mother would say this was wrong, that he should know what things cost, that keeping him ignorant doesn't protect him, it just delays the moment when he finds out, and delayed reckoning is always harder than immediate reckoning. Your mother was usually right, but your mother also died at 41 years old from typhus complicated by hunger and overwork, and the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from keeping a family alive in a collapsing world. So you take her wisdom seriously and apply it selectively. You're walking east now, away from Commercial Street into the back streets behind the market. The streets get narrower and darker. The gas lamps are farther apart. The surfaces underfoot are cobblestones at the main roads and compressed earth at the lanes, and the earth lanes have taken on the texture of frozen mud in tonight's cold. A crinkled surface that crunches slightly under your boots. You know this neighbourhood. You know it the way you know your own room, not because it's comfortable, but because you've mapped it through necessity. Every street and alley between Flower and Dean and Brick Lane and Whitechapel Road. Every bakery that lets people stand near the wall at night. Every pump, every shortcut. Every place you should not be after dark if you want to get home without incident. You're not in that last category of places right now. You are in Wentworth Street, which is a daytime market street where the traders take over the cobblestones with their stalls and their barrows and their shouts and their smells. Old clothes, second-hand tools, fish that is perhaps not quite as fresh as the vendor insists. The full chaotic inventory of the Whitechapel used goods trade, but which at 2 in the morning is almost entirely empty. Almost. There's a man sitting on an upturned crate at the far end of the street, a small fire burning in an iron pot at his feet. A rag and bone man, or the crate and the fire and the large handcart beside him suggest as much. He's cooking something over the fire. The smell reaches you from 20 feet away. Something fatty, something burned, something that is technically food. You stop. Not because you want what he's cooking, though. You're hungry. You're always somewhat hungry. Hunger is the baseline condition of your life, the way cold is the baseline condition of tonight. You stop because the fire is warm, visibly warm from here, and the cold has been working on you for half an hour, and your feet are beginning to hurt in a specific, deep way. That means your circulation is struggling. He looks up as you approach, assesses you, not threateningly. It's a professional assessment. The glance of a man who spends his nights alone in streets like this one and has learned to read people quickly as a survival skill. "Evening," he says. "Evening. You lost?" "No." He nods at this, as if it were the expected answer. Gestures at the space beside the fire. "Warming up, then? If you don't mind. Makes no difference to me." You stand by the fire. The heat from the iron pot isn't significant. It's a small fire, meant for the cooking pot, not for warmth. But it's there, and after the street it's something. Your hands come out from under your shawl and hover near the flame, not close enough to feel dangerous, close enough to begin to feel again. The man stirs whatever is in the pot with a stick. He's maybe 50, 60. Hard to tell with men who've spent their lives outdoors. The weather ages you faster than time does. His hands are remarkable, or you notice them because your own hands are cold and you're paying attention to hands. Enormous, dark with ingrained dirt that no amount of washing would entirely remove. One finger missing from the left hand at the second knuckle. "Cold tonight," he says. "Yes." "Coal run out?" You look at him. He makes a small gesture, something between a shrug and a nod. You're not the first out walking tonight with that particular face. Seen 3 or 4 already. What face is that? The working it out face. When you're walking, because standing still in the cold is worse, but you're not going anywhere particular. When the room's colder than the street. He says this without particular sympathy or condescension, just description. "The coal ran out last night, you say?" He stirs the pot. "Briggs's building on Flower and Dean, is it? The one with the broken window on the second landing?" You look at him again. "I do the rag and bone on Flower and Dean," he says. "Monday mornings. I know which buildings haven't got enough coal to warm themselves and which ones do. It's in the rubbish. Cold buildings got different rubbish than a warm one. Colder it is, the more they burn what they shouldn't. Furniture, kindling, anything. Warm buildings got coal ash. Cold buildings got ash from wood and sometimes cloth." This is the most he's said. He seems to have run out of words or reached the limit of what feels appropriate and goes back to stirring. "My name's Mary," you say. "Tom," he says. You stand by his fire for perhaps 10 minutes. He eats from the pot, whatever it is, and offers you some with a look rather than words, and you decline with a look in return, and this small negotiation happens entirely without language, which is somehow comfortable. The cold is still there, it hasn't gone anywhere. But your hands have come back to themselves, the feeling returning in that slightly painful way that means the blood is moving again. "There's a place on Dorset Street," Tom says, as if continuing a conversation that's been going on in his head. "Mrs. Carter's. 6pence a night, but she keeps a proper fire going all night and she's got 3 rooms in the back. Not just one common room. Decent enough. He's not suggesting you go there. He's just offering information, the way people in this neighbourhood share information. Not as advice, not with expectation, just as data. I've got a room, you say. Right, he says. You push away from the fire. Your hands are warmer. Your feet are still cold, but better. Thank you. Nothing to thank, he says. Fire was burning anyway. You walk back the way you came. On the way home, you pass the bakery. The bakery on Commercial Street operates all night. This is not generosity, as it's economics. Bread needs to be ready when the market opens at 5 in the morning, which means baking through the night, which means the ovens are running from about 10 in the evening until 3 or 4 in the morning. The wall of the bakery that faces the alley on the eastern side is warm. Not just warm, genuinely, specifically warm. Warm enough that in the alley beside it, on the worst nights of winter, there are usually 3 or 4 people pressed against the wall where it's warmest, standing or sitting or leaning, absorbing the brick's warmth through their clothes. Tonight there are 2. An old woman in a black shawl who doesn't look up when you approach, and a man in a labourer's coat who's sitting on his heels against the wall with his eyes closed. Not sleeping. Sitting too precisely for sleeping, but resting. You press your own back against the wall. The warmth comes through immediately. Through your coat, through the shawl, through the wool of your dress underneath. It reaches your spine and your shoulder blades and your lower back. It's not dramatic. It's not the warmth of a fire or a warm room. It's the residual warmth of a wall that has been heated from the inside for 6 hours, stored in brick and mortar and slowly radiating outward. It is enough to make your eyes close for a moment. You stand there for recessed minutes, maybe 15, with your back against the bakery wall and the cold pressing on your front and the stored warmth pressing on your back, and you breathe slowly, and you let yourself stop thinking about the arithmetic for a little while. The old woman in the black shawl says something, a murmur. Sorry? I said, it gets worse. Her voice is old, Irish like yours, but a different part of Ireland. The vowels have a different shape. The cold, she says. It's only November, it gets worse. I know. You're young, she says. Not an insult. Just an observation. I'm 19. You'll learn to keep more coal by. She says this without judgment or criticism, the way you'd say you'll learn to bring an umbrella when it looks like rain. Not now, you don't have it now, but later, when you've got a bit more. Keep it back, don't burn it right away. I'll remember, you say. She nods, pulls her shawl tighter. You stand with her at the bakery wall for another few minutes, and then she moves off without saying goodbye. Not rudely, just practically the way people move in this neighbourhood when the next thing they need to do is clear to them, and you stand alone for another minute and then start walking home. The building on Flower and Dean Street is exactly as you left it. The door gives way at the usual combination of force and angle. The staircase, the candle stub, now definitely dying. 10 minutes of life at most. The 3rd floor corridor, the doors, the quiet behind each one. Your door, you open it and step back into the room. Thomas is still asleep. Mrs. Hannigan is still quiet behind her sacking. The room is exactly as cold as when you left it. You'd hoped somehow that it would be different when you returned, that walking and the bakery wall and Tom's fire had changed something. They haven't. The brazier is still dead, the floor is still cold, the air in the room still has that particular bitten quality that cold air has when it's been cold for hours. But something is slightly different. The arithmetic is still the same. 9pence. Seconds coal or bread. The choice has not changed. The cold hasn't changed. None of the facts have changed. But you've been outside and come back, and there's something that walking does to the working it out brain that just lying in the cold doesn't do. The loop has been interrupted. You take off your coat and fold it over the foot of the mattress. You pull off your boots. You get back onto the mattress beside Thomas and pull. What blanket there is around both of you. He stirs slightly. Doesn't wake. His body warmth is there. 3 years of sleeping near your brother in cold rooms. It's different from when you were children. Less instinctive. More deliberate. But it's warm where he is, and you pull the blanket up to your chin and press as close as is reasonable, and breathe slowly. The cold is still there. It will be there until morning, but you're warm enough, just barely warm enough, 1 degree above the line, and that's what you have. The morning comes the way mornings in November in London always come, reluctantly and all at once. Not the slow brightening of a summer dawn, not the gradual warming that makes waking up bearable, just the world going from dark to grey, the grey light coming through the window in a flat, uninviting rectangle, the sounds of the building coming back to life around you, footsteps in the corridor, a door slamming 2 floors up, the sound of water being poured from a jug somewhere nearby, a child's voice high and sharp, cut off by an adult murmur. You open your eyes and the first thing you're aware of is the cold, still there, exactly where you left it. The second thing is Thomas, already sitting up, looking at the brazier. No coal, he says. He says it without accusation. It's an observation, the same way you'd observe that the window is closed or that Mrs. Hannigan is still asleep. He's known about money since before you stopped trying to protect him from it. You just haven't told him the details. I'll get some this morning. He looks at you. He's 16, and he's your brother, and he knows you. He knows the particular way you say things when you've already done the arithmetic and the arithmetic ended somewhere short. How much? Enough, you say. A pause. I've got 4pence, he says, from the Saturday market. Keep it. Mary. Keep it, Thomas. He looks at you for another moment, then he lies back down and pulls the blanket over his shoulders and doesn't argue, which is the thing he does when he knows arguing won't work, which means he's older than 16 in the ways that matter. You get up for real. The routine of a morning when there's no coal is different from the routine when there is. When there's coal, you light the brazier first, and the room comes to grudging life around the warmth. Not much warmth, not a roaring fire, but enough to make the morning tasks possible without actively fighting your own hands. You wash from the basin, which is cold but not unbearably cold. You dress. You eat whatever there is. Bread, usually, sometimes porridge if you've got oatmeal, occasionally a bit of cheese. Without coal, the morning is a combat operation. You dress as fast as your fingers allow, layering everything you have, the second dress over the first, the shawl over both, the coat over that, the gloves that have holes in the left forefinger and the right thumb but are still better than nothing. You wash your face from the basin with water that has a thin film of ice on it, not solid, just the first suggestion of freezing at the edges, and the cold of it on your face is sharp enough to make you inhale through your teeth. Mrs. Hannigan is awake. You can hear her moving behind the sacking, the slow, deliberate movements of an older body that doesn't warm up quickly in the morning. Morning, Mrs. Hannigan, a sound that is technically a greeting. She'll be more communicative once she's had tea, which will require a fire, which requires... You pick up the coal bucket. Empty. You look at the ninepence in your coat pocket. I'm going to get coal, you say, to the room in general. Mrs. Hannigan makes the sound again. This time it has a slightly approving quality. The coal merchant's yard on Commercial Street opens at 6 in the morning. You're there at 5 minutes past 6. The gates are open. The yard dog is awake, sitting near the gate, watching you with a professional expression. The merchant is a stocky man with arms that suggest a lifetime of moving heavy things. He has the hands of someone who's worked outdoors in all weathers, dark, calloused, the nails broken and black-edged. He gives you the same assessment you've given 100 customers yourself. Quick, thorough, reaching a conclusion before you've said anything. Seconds, he says. Slack, you say. A stone. He looks at you for a moment. Something in his expression shifts. Not pity, nothing quite that soft, but a kind of recognition. Seconds burn better, he says. Slack, you'll be coffin by noon. I know. He looks at you for another moment. Then he takes the scoop and fills the sack. You watch his hands. He fills it a little fuller than a stone. Maybe 16 pounds rather than 14. He doesn't mention this. You don't mention this. 4 pence, he says. You hand it over. He takes it. The transaction is complete. You lift the sack. 14, 16 pounds. It's not nothing over your shoulder on the walk home, but it's manageable. You've carried worse. Get some seconds next week, he says, without looking at you. Before the really cold comes in. I will, you say. He nods. You walk out through the gates, past the yard dog, back onto Commercial Street. 5 pence left. The arithmetic continues. The fire in the brazier takes 8 minutes to catch. Slack is difficult to light. It needs careful encouragement. The flame coaxed from the kindling into the dust. The dust persuaded to hold before the larger pieces are added. You crouch in front of the brazier with a small box of lucifers that you keep on the shelf above it, and work at it methodically. The lucifer matches are Bryant and May's own product. You get them at a discount, 6 pence for a box of 100, as opposed to 9 pence on the street. This is one of the few direct benefits of the work. They are not the best matches available. The quality control at the factory is inconsistent because the conditions of the factory are inconsistent and the workers are tired, and tired hands are imprecise hands, but they work. The first lucifer catches and dies. The second catches. You hold it at the angle that gives the kindling the best chance. The kindling, a handful of split wood scraps from the basket beside the brazier, the basket being fed by whatever wood you can find or afford, begins to catch. Small orange flames at first, tentative, then more certain. You feed the slack in carefully, a thin layer first. Too much and you smother the young fire. You've done this enough times to know the exact rate of feeding, the exact amount the fire takes. Not triumphantly, not with the leap and crackle of a proper coal fire. A sullen, grudging acceptance of its function. The slack smokes more than it should. The smoke comes up from the brazier in a dark column and finds its way out through the crack in the window frame and the gaps in the walls, but not before it has deposited a faint stinging quality on the air that makes your eyes water slightly. The smoke is, by the way, one of the reasons the cheap slack is cheap. Better quality coal burns cleaner, poorer quality coal burns dirtier. This seems like an abstract technical distinction, until you're living in an 11 by 9 room with 3 people and a smoking brazier, and by mid-morning everyone's coughing into their sleeves. But the room is warm. It's warming. The difference is perceptible. Not immediate, not dramatic, but perceptible. Thomas comes back to life as the warmth increases. He rolls onto his back and stretches and makes the specific sound of a 16-year-old who has been asleep for 10 hours and is now being asked to participate in the world again. Mrs. Hannigan, on the other side of the sacking, says something that might be a prayer, or might be a comment on the smoke, or might be both simultaneously. You put the kettle on. The kettle is your best possession. Tin, not copper, you can't afford copper. With a handle that has been reattached twice with wire and a spout that pours slightly to one side. You fill it from the pitcher, which you filled yesterday from the pump at the end of the street, and you set it on the iron trivet over the brazier. 5 minutes, you make tea, strong enough to almost stand a spoon in. Tea leaves from the small tin on the shelf, the same leaves used twice because the first brewing still has something in it, and the third brewing is pushing it, but sometimes you push it. 3 cups. Chipped enamel for you and Thomas, Mrs. Hannigan's own heavy clay mug that she brought from Cork and has not broken in 20 years, which may be the most impressive structural achievement in the building. The 3 of you sit, you on the mattress, Thomas on the floor beside it, Mrs. Hannigan on her wooden chair that she brought from the corner, and drink tea, and the fire smokes its sullen smoke, and outside the building, Flower and Dean Street comes to life with the sounds of morning. This is what warmth costs in November 1867. 4 pence, a stone of slack, the right angle with the lucifers, 8 minutes of encouragement, and then this. Tea in a warm room, small, specific, absolutely necessary. The factory whistle at Bryant and May's blows at 6:30. You hear it from the room. Everyone in this part of East London hears it. The sound carries across Whitechapel and into Spitalfields and down to the river. A hard, flat note that means something different depending on who you are and where you stand in relation to it. For the merchants and clerks in the better streets, it's background noise, city texture. For you, it's an alarm, not the whistle itself. You're always awake before it. But the whistle tells you how much time you have left before you need to be standing at your bench with your apron on and your hands in position, because the foreman at Bryant and May's takes lateness as a personal offence, and a personal offence from the foreman results in a fine, and a fine comes directly out of your wages, and your wages are already the number around which all other numbers are organised. You have 45 minutes from the whistle to the start of work. The factory is in Bow, which is east of Whitechapel, which means a walk of roughly 25 minutes if you don't dawdle, and nothing blocks the road. You have 20 minutes to finish your tea, eat whatever there is to eat, and get yourself out of the building and moving. Eat something, you say to Thomas. He holds up his cup of tea. That's not food. It's warm. Thomas. He takes the heel of bread you put in front of him without further argument. He eats it in 3 bites, which is the way he eats everything, like he's afraid someone will take it, which is possibly not a fear that's entirely invented. Mrs. Hannigan eats her bread more carefully. Small bites, chewed thoroughly. She's got fewer teeth than she used to have, and she's made the adjustment in her eating style that older people make without drawing attention to it. Smaller pieces, longer consideration, the work distributed more evenly. You eat standing up, not because there's nowhere to sit. There's the floor, there's the mattress. But because sitting down in the morning with food, when you have 45 minutes and a 25-minute walk, is a luxury you haven't figured out how to afford. Eating standing up means you're already in the posture of moving. It's faster. The bread is 2 days old. It's past the point where you'd choose it if you had choices, but it's not past the point of being food. You chew it carefully and swallow and finish the tea and put the cup down on the shelf. I'll be back by 7:30, you say. There might be extra work this week. They mentioned Saturday afternoon. I've got the Moseley job Saturday, Thomas says. The Moseley job is moving furniture for a family on Mile End Road who are changing lodgings. Thomas gets 3 shillings for a full day of it, which is good money for a 16-year-old with no particular trade and more good sense than experience. Good, you say. You button your coat, check your pocket. The 5p is there. You don't need it today. Today is Tuesday, and you get paid on Friday, and between now and Friday the 5p will have to decide its own fate. But you check it the same way you always check it, because knowing it's there is its own kind of arithmetic, small and necessary. Don't let the fire die, you tell Thomas. He nods. You go. Flower and Dean Street in the early morning is a different version of itself from the 2 a.m. street you walked last night. The same street, the same buildings, the same cobblestones slick with the overnight damp. But now it's moving. People coming out of every building, not all at once, but steadily. A human flow, mostly women, mostly young, mostly heading in the same general direction. The factory girls. Bryant and Mays draws from this neighbourhood because this neighbourhood is where cheap labour lives, and Bryant and Mays needs a great deal of cheap labour. You fall into step with the current. The cold is the same, if anything, colder now in the early morning than it was at 2, before the city has warmed at all, before the coal smoke from a million fires has laid its insulating layer over everything. Your breath comes out in clouds. The woman beside you, Ellen, she works the same bench, is pulling her gloves on as she walks, one finger at a time. Morning, she says without looking at you. Morning. Cold. Yes. This is the full extent of early morning conversation on the walk to Bryant and Mays. Not because you and Ellen aren't friendly. You are, as much as 12 hours a day in the same room permits, but because conversation in the morning cold requires effort, and effort requires warmth. And warmth is something you're saving. You walk east on Whitechapel Road. The road is already active. Horse-drawn carts heading toward the market, a milk cart making its rounds with its specific sound of metal cans against metal frame. A line of men at the dock hiring gate 3 blocks north. You can see them from here. A queue that stretches back along the road. 50 men at least waiting for the chance to be selected for a day's unloading. The dock work is brutal, and the pay is inconsistent, and you have to be there by 5 a.m. to get a decent position in the queue. Thomas has tried it twice, and came back the second time with a bruised shoulder from a dropped crate, and the news that he'd made 1 shilling and 4p for 9 hours, and that he'd rather move furniture. You pass a woman selling hot coffee from a tin urn on a barrow, 2p a cup. The smell of it reaches you, real coffee, or something close enough that in the cold early morning the distinction doesn't matter, and you keep walking. The arithmetic. You walk through the arithmetic the way you walk through the neighbourhood. Automatically, the route's so familiar it doesn't require thought. Friday wages, 6 shillings. Rent due on the 1st, 8 shillings, meaning you need 2 weeks' wages and whatever Thomas brings in, plus the Moseley job. Food for the week, 1 shilling 6 minimum. Coal, 6p, proper coal this time, not slack, before the cold gets worse. That leaves. You're doing the same arithmetic you did at 2 a.m. and it still doesn't come out. But you know this. You know it before you start. The arithmetic is not there to produce answers. It's there to remind you what you're working with. You know what you're working with. Turning right off the main road, heading toward the factory district. The streets change here. less domestic, more industrial, the buildings taller and blanker, less window and more wall. The smell changes too. Less of the organic, biological smell of dense human habitation, more of the sharp chemical smell of manufacturing, glue from the box-making workshops, dye from the textile factories, and underlying it from the east, the specific smell of Bryant and May's. Phosphorus. You've mentioned the phosphorus. You carry it home in your skin. Let me tell you what it smells like. White phosphorus has a particular smell that is difficult to describe to anyone who hasn't encountered it directly. It's chemical, yes. There's nothing organic about it. But it's also somehow warm. A warm chemical smell, almost like garlic in certain concentrations. Almost like something burned. Always with that undercurrent that is neither quite pleasant nor quite unpleasant, but is entirely specific to this one substance. By itself, in small amounts, in a well-ventilated space, it is not terrifying. In the factory, in the dipping rooms where the matches are made, the concentration is not in small amounts and the ventilation is not generous. Bryant and May's Fairfield Works occupies a large site in Bow, east of the River Lee. The factory was founded in 1861 by Francis Bryant and William May, who between them had the business acumen to recognise that the rapidly industrialising city of London required matches in enormous quantities, and that enormous quantities required a proper factory rather than the cottage industry that had produced matches before. They were right. The business has grown every year since its founding. By 1867, Bryant and May's employs over 1,000 workers at the Bow site alone, predominantly women and girls, predominantly from the East End of London, predominantly Irish. The economics of this arrangement are not complicated. Women can be paid less than men. Girls can be paid less than women. Irish workers, recent immigrants with limited options and no established networks, can be paid less than English workers. Therefore, a factory employing young Irish women is a factory with one of the lowest wage bills in the manufacturing sector. Bryant and May's pays its dipping girls, the ones who actually make the matches dipping the wooden splints into the phosphorus paste, 6 shillings a week. This is not the bottom of the London wage scale. It is well below the middle. The factory is also the source of something that the company does not advertise, and that you have learned about in the way you learn about most dangerous things. Not from any authority, not from any official source, but from other workers, in whispers, in the specific way that people share information about threats that the people in power have decided it's better not to discuss. Phossy jaw. The proper name is phosphorus necrosis of the jaw. You don't know the proper name. You know phossy jaw, which is the name the workers use, which was invented by the workers because the workers are the ones who live with it and who gave it a name that matches what it is. White phosphorus, when inhaled over a long period in sufficient quantities, gets into the bones, specifically into the jaw. The jaw begins to deteriorate. This happens slowly, over months, over years, and the early stages, a persistent toothache, a swelling in the jaw, a sensitivity to cold air, could be a dozen different things, and some workers see them for what they are, and some workers don't or can't afford to or are afraid to, and either way the factory doesn't tell you, and the foreman doesn't tell you, and the company doctor, if you ever see the company doctor, doesn't tell you. The late stages are not subtle. The jaw begins to swell visibly. In darkness, in certain advanced cases, the jaw glows. The phosphorus accumulated in the bone produces a faint greenish light. Not bright, not dramatic, but visible in a dark room, abscessing. The bone itself begins to die and liquefy, and the smell is specific and unforgettable if you are unfortunate enough to encounter it at close range. The treatment in 1867 is surgery. They remove the jaw. The patient lives sometimes without a jaw. There are women in Whitechapel, former Bryant and Mays workers, who have no jaws. You have seen one. You have not seen her more than once. After the first time, you arrange not to be in the same room, not from cruelty, but from the specific, rational terror of someone who spends 10 hours a day inhaling the substance that did that. You know this, and you walk to work anyway. This is not courage, this is arithmetic. 6 shillings a week is what there is. The alternatives, and you've looked at the alternatives, you've calculated them, you've talked to women doing other things, are not better. Domestic service pays a few shillings a week, but requires living in the employer's house, which means giving up your room and having nowhere to put Thomas. Sewing piecework pays by the piece, and the pieces coming consistently, and the rate per piece is adjusted downward whenever the contractors think they can get away with it. Laundry work is brutal. Standing in hot water 12 hours a day, the skin of your hands eventually giving up and cracking open, the infections that follow, the lung problems from the steam. 6 shillings at Bryant and Mays, with the room on Flower and Dean Street, is what makes the arithmetic work. Barely, on the edge of barely, so you walk to work. The factory gates open at 7. You're there at 6:58, which is how you are every morning. Not first, never last, positioned in the exact middle of the stream of arriving workers to avoid both the pushiness of first arrivals and the anxious lateness of the last ones. Ellen is beside you. On your other side is a girl named Bridie who came from Limerick 8 months ago and still looks faintly shocked by everything. The way you looked faintly shocked by everything for the first 6 months. The gates open, you file in. The dipping room is on the 2nd floor. To get there, you pass through the ground floor loading area. The smell of wood and the sound of the splint-cutting machinery running already, and up a staircase that has been worn smooth by thousands of feet over 6 years, and that smells of the factory itself. That particular compound of phosphorus and wood and machine oil and the specific kind of institutional cleanliness that is not cleanliness at all, but the surface impression of cleanliness maintained for the benefit of the inspectors who come twice a year and walk through quickly and write their reports in offices elsewhere. The dipping room is long and low-ceilinged, 20 benches arranged in 4 rows. At each bench, a worker, or the worker's place, at this hour still empty. You're among the early ones. At the end of each bench, the hopper of wooden splints and the tray of phosphorus paste. The trays of phosphorus paste are the reason the room smells the way it does. There are 40 of them, 1 per bench, and the paste is warm. It has to be kept at a certain temperature to maintain the right consistency for dipping, and warm phosphorus paste in an enclosed room in winter, when the windows are kept closed to preserve the temperature of the paste, is an olfactory experience that no description quite captures. Garlic and sulphur, something electrical, something hot. The smell sits at the back of your throat in a way that isn't quite burning and isn't quite anything else. A warm chemical presence that you've learned to ignore, the same way you've learned to ignore the cold. You tie your apron, you sit at your bench, you pull on the cotton gloves. The gloves have holes in them. They're always developing holes. The paste gets in anyway, but the gloves are required by the foreman's rules, so you wear the gloves with the holes and the paste gets in through the holes, and the whole arrangement is a compromise between regulation and reality. You begin. Take a handful of splints from the hopper, fan them in your left hand, tips downward, angled at exactly the right degree. You don't think about the angle anymore, your hand knows it. Lower the tips into the paste. Lift. Lay carefully on the drying rack, spacing them evenly so they don't touch and stick together. Take another handful. Dip. Lay. The motion takes maybe 8 seconds per bundle. 65 bundles before the rack is full and needs to be moved. The rack moves itself. Someone comes every 20 minutes with a trolley to take full racks to the drying room and bring empty ones. So your job is continuous. Dip, lay, dip, lay, dip, lay, for 10 hours with a 30-minute break at noon. This is 10 hours. You stop thinking about it in terms of 10 hours after the first week. You stop counting. You stop marking time against any external measure. You find the rhythm, and the rhythm becomes the time, becomes the entire experience of the morning, the hiss of the other women's work around you, the occasional clatter of a rack being moved, the foreman's footsteps behind you at irregular intervals, the faint continuous smell. Bridie, 2 benches down, works faster than you. She always has. Some workers are faster, some slower, and the rate you maintain is the sustainable rate, the one that gets through 10 hours without your hands cramping or your back seizing up in that specific way that happens when you push too hard too early. Bridie will slow down by 2 in the afternoon, she always does, and then she'll push again for the last hour because the foreman watches the last hour more carefully than any other. Ellen, beside you, works at exactly your pace. She's been here 3 years longer than you and has calibrated herself to the exact sustainable rate and will maintain it until the whistle blows, which is the most professionally impressive thing you've ever witnessed. Cold this morning, Ellen says without looking up from her work. Coal ran out, you say, without looking up from your work. Get seconds next time. She says this in the same tone the coal merchant used. Not unkindly, just the specific advice that everyone who has lived in Whitechapel for more than 2 winters eventually gives to everyone who is still learning the rules. I'll remember. I say that every year. A pause, the length of one dipping motion. Still sometimes by slack. You almost smile. The 30-minute break at noon. This is the half hour that structures the day. Not the beginning, not the end, not the whistle at 7 or the whistle at 6, but noon. The pivot. The moment when the morning becomes the afternoon, and you are allowed to exist as something other than the hands at the bench for 30 minutes. You eat outside when the weather permits. It doesn't quite permit today. The cold is still November sharp. The sky a uniform grey that has been threatening rain since morning and has not quite delivered. But outside is better than the dipping room, which has the accumulated warmth of 40 bodies and 40 warm phosphorus trays and the smell of 10 hours of concentrated work. You eat bread. The bread from this morning, the heel you save from your own breakfast by not eating it at breakfast. You eat it now, standing in the factory yard, leaning against the brick wall of the loading building where it's slightly sheltered from the wind. Ellen eats beside you. She has something better, a piece of pie wrapped in newspaper, purchased from the woman who sells outside the gate on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The smell of it reaches you. Hot pastry, something meaty inside. Your stomach does something involuntary and specific. Ellen notices. She tears off a corner of the pie and holds it out. You shake your head. She pushes it closer. You take it. This is the economy of small things. The corner of a pie, offered without ceremony, accepted without ceremony, requiring nothing in return except the mutual acknowledgement that it exists and that it matters. You will return it somehow, eventually, not deliberately, not as a transaction, but as the natural rhythm of proximity and shared circumstances. When you have something to give, you give it, and the ledger is never formally balanced, but it runs, quietly, underneath everything else. The pie is beef, real beef, or something close enough that in the cold and the hunger the distinction is academic. It's hot. The heat of it moves down your throat and warms something in your chest that the tea this morning started on, and the walking finished. They're taking on an extra shift, Ellen says. Saturday afternoon, half shift, 3 hours. I know, I'm thinking about it. 9p for 3 hours. She says it with the tone of someone who has already made the calculation. Take it. Thomas has the Moseley job Saturday. You don't need Thomas's permission to work a half shift. This is true. You don't. Thomas doesn't govern your schedule. The practical consideration is the room. On Saturdays, when you both work, Mrs. Hannigan is alone in the room from 7 in the morning to 6 in the evening, and she manages perfectly well. Has been managing perfectly well for 2 years, but you feel better knowing someone you trust is there. And Thomas being home by 4 means someone is there. This is what the arithmetic includes that nobody sees. The invisible calculations. Not just money, but time and trust, and who is where and what they're doing, and whether the thing you're worrying about is a real worry, or the shape your mind makes when there's nothing concrete left to worry about. I'll take it, you say. Ellen nods, finishes her pie. The factory whistle blows. 30 minutes exactly. You go back in. The afternoon is the long part. Morning has the energy of beginning. Noon has its 30 minutes. Evening has the finish line. The afternoon has nothing except the afternoon. The long middle stretch from 1 to 6 where the rhythm becomes everything, and the rhythm carries you forward, because there is no other way forward. Your hands work. Your mind goes where it goes. Today it goes to the problem of coal, which is to say to the problem of money, which is to say to the problem that is the permanent background condition of everything else. There are people at this factory who have been here since it opened. 6 years. They have navigated 6 years of the arithmetic, and they're still here, which means they have found a way to make the numbers work, or to live beside the numbers not working, or to find some third thing that isn't either of those. There's a woman named Joan at the far end of the room who's been at Bryant and May's for 5 years. She's 34 years old. She lives with her husband and 3 children on Bethnal Green Road in 2 rooms. 2 rooms, not 1, which is a different life in ways that are hard to overstate. And her husband works at the printing works on Commercial Road. 2 incomes, 2 rooms. This is the trajectory, or one version of it. Work until there's someone to work with you, not as a solution to loneliness, not primarily, but as a solution to the arithmetic. 2 wages, however small, produce a different arithmetic than 1. You're not interested in the arithmetic of other people's lives as a model for your own. You're not going to resolve anything by attaching yourself to someone else's wages. You have resolved. You resolved it 3 years ago on the boat from Sligo, watching Thomas sleep in the rocking dark, that the way forward is Thomas finishing school, which he's done, Thomas getting a real trade, which is in progress, Thomas being able to take care of himself, which will happen, which is already happening, and then you'll see. Right now the dipping rack needs to move, and you've been waiting for the trolley boy, and he's late. Again. Which happens every Tuesday, because on Tuesdays he also does the loading dock, and he splits himself too thin, and it's not his fault, but the consequence is that the rhythm breaks, and you have to wait, hand still, watching the splints dry on the rack, which is the kind of interruption that makes the afternoon stretch. The foreman passes. He doesn't look at you. He's looking at Bridie, who has slowed down again and is doing the thing she does at 2 o'clock, where she rubs her right wrist with her left hand and tries not to let the foreman see. You look at your own hands, the cotton gloves, brown with paste at the fingertips, the slight red staining above the glove's edge at your wrist where the paste gets in. Your hands do not shake. They're not what they were 3 years ago. The skin is rougher. The knuckle of your right forefinger has a permanent slight swelling from the repetitive motion. But they're steady, and they're strong, and they know what they're doing. This is something. Not everything, but something. The whistle at 6 o'clock. Not triumphant, not dramatic, just the end of the day, declared by a whistle, and the room begins to move. You untie your apron, hang it on its hook, above the bench. You peel off the cotton gloves, carefully, because the paste is still on them and on your hands. And getting paste on your coat is a different problem. You wash your hands in the basin along the far wall, the water cold, the rough soap the factory provides doing what rough soap does, which is remove most of the surface contamination and leave your hands feeling scraped and raw. The walk back is the mirror of the walk in. The same streets, the same cold, but now you're tired in the specific way that 10 hours of precise repetitive motion produces. Not the exhaustion of heavy lifting, not the brain tired of complicated mental work, but the deep, fine-grained tiredness of muscles that have performed the same motion 6,000 times and have saved every effort they could and are now spending the reserves. Your back is the first thing you notice when you stop moving for more than a minute. The bench height is not quite right for you. It's set for a slightly shorter woman, or slightly longer arms, some combination, and 10 hours at slightly the wrong height produces a sustained low ache that you feel from the base of your spine up to the middle of your back. Constant, familiar. Ellen walks beside you without talking. This is fine. This is the specific fellowship of people who've been in the same room for 10 hours and have nothing left to perform. At the corner of Whitechapel Road, she turns right. You turn left. Tomorrow, she says. Tomorrow, you say. And you walk home. The building on Flower and Dean Street receives you the way it always does, without comment. The door, the staircase, the candle stub replaced. Thomas must have replaced it, which means he was home, which means the Moseley job isn't until Saturday. Up the stairs, the corridor, your door. The room is warm, not dramatically warm, not the warm of a room where the fire has been burning all day, but actually warm. The slack coal has been burning since this morning. Thomas has been tending it. The small space has accumulated heat over the day in the slow, gradual way that small spaces do. Thomas is sitting on the floor near the brazier with a piece of paper and a stub of pencil. He's doing his letters. He learned to read at the mission school on Spitalfields before you arrived in London, and he reads well enough, but his writing is still uncertain. The letters come out unevenly, the spacing inconsistent, and he's been working on it with a methodical patience that you find obscurely moving. Mrs. Hannigan is behind her sacking. You can hear the specific sound of her rosary beads, the click of them against each other. "Good day?" Thomas asks without looking up from his paper. "Average," you say. This is the honest answer. Good days and bad days at Bryant and Mays are largely indistinguishable by any external measure. The work is the same, the hours are the same, the pay is the same. What varies is the internal weather. Whether the day passes in the state of rhythm that makes 10 hours bearable, or whether it breaks and you're aware of every individual minute for the whole of the afternoon. Today passed in rhythm. That's a good day. There's bread, Thomas says, and I got a bit of dripping from Mrs. Connell. She said she had extra. He pauses. I don't know if she had extra. She was being kind. I know. He looks up now. I said thank you properly. Good. You hang your coat on the hook behind the door. You unwrap the shawl. You sit on the edge of the mattress and reach down and begin to work at your bootlaces. This takes a moment. The laces stiff from the cold and the damp, and feel the relief of the boots coming off that you feel every evening. The specific relief of feet freed from the constraint of leather. Your feet are cold and slightly damp. You rub them through your wool stockings. The warmth of the room reaches them slowly. I've been thinking, Thomas says. You wait. Mr. Riley said, there might be a place at the cabinet maker's on Bethnal Green Road. He says this to the paper in front of him. Junior apprentice. Not much money at first. Less than the market work, but it's a trade. You look at him. He's not looking at you, still apparently focused on his paper, but the focus is manufactured. He's watching the idea land. How much less? 2 shillings a week to start for the first year. He pauses. Then 4. Then it depends. 2 shillings a week. Your room is 10 shillings a month. Your wages alone barely cover the room and food. If Thomas goes from irregular market work, 5 shillings in a good week, to 2 shillings guaranteed, there is a period, a difficult period before the 4 shillings come in when... You'd need a letter of introduction, Thomas says. Mr. Riley said he'd write one, but I'd need someone from the neighbourhood to vouch. Mrs. Hannigan would vouch. A pause. Would she? You look toward the sacking, the rosary beads. Have stopped. Of course I would, Mrs. Hannigan says from behind the sacking, in her voice that is cork and 20 years of London mixed into something all its own. Thomas's face does something complicated. Not quite relief, because he didn't know he was worried, and not quite happiness, because he hasn't got the apprenticeship yet, but some anticipatory version of both. It's a trade, you say, a proper trade. I know. Do it. He looks at you then, really looks at you, and you see what he looks like when he's not performing 16 for your benefit. Younger and more uncertain, and more like the boy who was 13 on a boat from Sligo looking at you like you had answers to questions he hadn't learned to ask yet. It'll be tight, he says. It's already tight. I mean tighter. I know what you mean. You put your stockinged feet on the floor, feel the warmth of the boards from the day's fire. Do it anyway. The tight part doesn't last forever. He nods, goes back to his paper. But the letters he writes now are slightly more confident than the ones before, which may be imagination on your part, or maybe the specific way that having made his decision changes how you hold a pencil. Supper is bread and dripping, and a few boiled potatoes that Mrs. Hannigan made in the afternoon while you and Thomas were out, in the small iron pot over the brazier that serves as the room's kitchen. Dripping is beef fat, the fat that collects at the bottom of the roasting pan when beef is cooked, gathered and cooled into a solid brown jelly that is spread on bread like butter. You don't have beef. You rarely have beef. Mrs. Connell, who does sometimes have beef because her husband was working again this week, has given Thomas her dripping, which is a gift worth more than its ingredients because it has salt and the memory of the meat in it, and the bread is improved dramatically by its presence. You eat at what serves as the table, a board on 2 wooden crates which has been the furniture of this room for as long as you've been here, which was there when you arrived, which Mrs. Hannigan says was there when she arrived. which you suspect has been there since the room was subdivided from its larger self, and may in fact be older than the room's current configuration. The potatoes are soft and slightly grey, in the way that potatoes are when they've been boiled without the skin, which is the way Mrs. Hannigan makes them. They taste of potato and of the faint mineral quality of the water from the Flower and Dean Street pump, which is better than the pump on Dorset Street, but not what you'd call a fine water. Thomas eats everything. Mrs. Hannigan eats half and wraps the rest in a cloth for the morning. You eat your share and consider the remaining bread and decide to save it, and this decision is the same decision you make every evening, and you make it the same way each time. Not dramatically, not with sacrifice, just later is when I'll want this, more than now. After supper, the evening. The evening's the part that nobody talks about. The reformers who come to Whitechapel to write about the conditions, write about the work and the wages and the housing and the food. They write about the gin shops and the crime and the disease. They write about what's wrong and what should be fixed and who is to blame. They do not generally write about the evenings. The evenings in a one-room slum are not dramatic. They are not the work and they are not the crisis. They are the space between work and sleep, and in that space life continues, not triumphantly, not despairingly, just continues. Mrs. Hannigan has her rosary. She says it every evening behind the sacking, her voice barely audible, the beads clicking their soft metronome. She has said it every evening for as long as you've known her, and probably for 20 years before that, and the fact that 20 years of evening prayers have not altered her circumstances to any visible degree does not appear to discourage her. Thomas has his letters. He works on them by the light of the small oil lamp, a halfpenny lamp, the cheapest kind. The light it produces more suggestion than illumination. His tongue slightly between his teeth, his right hand moving with the careful imprecision of someone teaching himself something without a teacher. You mend the gloves with the holes, the stockings that have developed thin patches at the heel, the hem of your second dress, which came loose 3 weeks ago on the left side and which you've been meaning to address. You do this by the same lamplight, your fingers working the needle by feel as much as by sight. The stitches small and even because a loose hem addressed poorly just becomes a loose hem again in 2 weeks. Mending is a kind of thinking. The hands work and the mind drifts, and what it drifts to is the specific texture of the day, not analysing, not planning, just this happened and then this. And the coal was slack, but it burned. And Ellen gave you the corner of her pie, and Thomas wants to be a cabinet maker. A cabinet maker. You think about this. A cabinet maker makes things. Real things. Solid things. Things that outlast the making of them. The furniture that travels with families through their lives. The chairs and tables and beds and presses and wardrobes that hold the objects of daily existence, that are present at births and deaths and ordinary Tuesdays. A cabinet maker leaves something behind. You make matches. Billions of them. A match is made to be struck and burned and gone. The work disappears in the moment of its use. There is no match in the world that knows it came from a girl at Bryant and May's bench on a Tuesday in November 1867. There's no record of the 10 hours, the 6,000 dipping motions, the 30-minute lunch break, the ache in the small of your back. This is fine. This is what work is, mostly for most people in most of history, but the cabinet makers, work stays. That seems worth something. Your needle goes through the hem of the dress and out the other side, and you pull the thread taut, and the hem holds, and you move to the next stitch. Later. The lamp is down to a thin flame. Mrs. Hannigan stopped her rosary an hour ago. Thomas is asleep, the paper with his letters still beside him on the floor, the pencil stub dropped where his hand let it go. Outside, the street. The street in the late evening is neither the working street of the day nor the dead-of-night street you walked last night. It's the in-between street still moving, but the movement changed in quality. Less purposeful, more circular, the sounds of people who are out because being inside is one thing they can't face right now, or because their inside is the size of yours and the walls are close and the cold is a presence. And sometimes you just need to walk. You sit by the window. The glass is filmed with the coal smoke of 1,000 chimneys, which means the street lamp below appears blurred, a yellowed smear of light rather than a clear flame. Through this you can see the top of the lamppost, and beyond it the upper stories of the building across the street. A building identical to yours in its construction, and its history and its current use, its windows squares of dim, warm light and dark. In one of those windows a figure is visible for a moment, a woman by the shape, leaning briefly against the glass. Then she moves back, and the window is just a window. You think about her briefly, who she is, what her evening is, what her arithmetic looks like. Then you don't think about her. She is one of the 500,000. Same as you. Same as you. This is the part of the story that the story is actually about. Not the coal, not the factory, not the arithmetic. The evenings. Because the day has its structure imposed on it from outside. The factory whistle sets the morning. The half shift sets the Saturday. The rent due on the 1st sets the month. The arithmetic is the skeleton around which everything else is organised, and the skeleton comes from outside. From the wages Bryant and Mays has decided to pay, and the rent Mr. Briggs has decided to charge, and the prices the coal merchant has decided to ask. But the evenings belong to you, not in the sense of leisure, not in the sense of choice. They are too short and too cold and too necessary for sleep to be anything as comfortable as that. But the evenings are the space where you're not performing your function in the economy of the city, not being the hands at the dipping bench, not being the tenant, not being the older sibling calculating the shortfall. You're sitting by the window in a small warm room in Whitechapel in 1867, watching the street, mending a hem by lamplight, listening to your brother breathe. This is your life, not what happens in it, the life itself. In Sligo, before everything, your mother used to say that the Hannigan women, the family, the Hannigans, no relation to Mrs. Hannigan in the corner, just the same name, the Hannigan women were made of the same material as the Sligo stone, grey and hard and good in weather. She said it without vanity, as a simple description. The stone doesn't complain about the rain. The stone is what it is. You've thought about this a great deal since coming to London. You're grey and hard, or you're becoming so. Whether this is good in weather you won't know until the weather tests it fully. You've been tested to a point. Not to the breaking point, or if you have been, you didn't break, which amounts to the same thing. 3 years in London, a room on Flower and Dean Street that is yours, in the specific way that tenancy makes things yours, not owned, not permanent, but occupied and defended and maintained. A brother who wants to be a cabinet maker, a job that pays 6 shillings a week and carries risks you don't think about directly, but that live in the room with you the same way the cold lives in the room. The coal ran out yesterday. Today you got more coal. The room is warm. This is the whole of it. This is the length and the breadth of the achievement. And lying beside Thomas, with Mrs. Hannigan's rosary silent and the street outside quietly doing its late evening business, you are not happy exactly, not in the way that would need to be defended or explained, but all right, solid, present, grey stone in weather. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday night, the building 2 doors down catches fire. Let me tell you how quickly fire moves through a Whitechapel street in winter. The buildings are old wood and older plaster, dried out by winter heating, pressed together with gaps between them that might as well be flues, vertical channels for wind and heat. The building 2 doors down catches fire. Someone's brazier is the theory later, tipped over in the night, coal on a wooden floor. And by the time anyone in the street is aware of it, it's no longer a room fire, it's a building. You wake to the smell before you wake fully, before you understand what you're smelling. The smoke reaches you through the walls and the floorboard gaps and the window crack, and your sleeping brain registers it and starts the process of waking your body before your consciousness has caught up. You're sitting up before you know why. The smell is not the smell of your own brazier, which you know as well as you know anything, which is the warm chemical smell of the slack coal and the faint phosphorus ghost from the factory. This is something older and sharper, the smell of a building burning, which has wood and plaster and everything that has been absorbed into those materials over decades all combusting at once. Thomas is already awake. He's at the window. Fire, he says. Calm, the way people are calm in the first moment of a crisis before the adrenaline arrives. Then the adrenaline arrives. You're on your feet. You grab your coat from the hook, the coat, the boots, the important things. And you look at Mrs. Hannigan's corner. Mrs. Hannigan. The sacking moves. Her face appears in the gap. She's awake. Of course she's awake. She's been awake since the first moment of the smell. I'm coming, she says. The corridor is already full. Not panicking, not yet. But the doors are opening and the people are coming out and the staircase is visible at the end of the corridor, and everyone is making the same calculation at the same moment. How close is it? And do we go? You look at Thomas. He has his coat. He has the paper with his letters in his pocket, you notice. He's grabbed it without thinking, the way people grab the thing that matters without thinking about it. Mrs. Hannigan comes through the sacking with her coat and her rosary, and her large clay mug and nothing else. The stairs, you say. You go down in a stream of people, 3 floors, the staircase holding everyone it needs to hold. The candle stub on the 3rd floor landing has burned down, but there's enough light from outside. The fire itself providing light. A flickering orange through the front windows of the corridor, which tells you the fire is visible from the street, which tells you it's progressed. Ground floor, the door, left shoulder, slight lift, right hip, and you're out. The street outside is alive in the way streets only become when something large is happening. Every building has emptied. 60, 70 people from yours alone standing in the street in various states of dress and undress, in coats and shawls and in 2 cases nightclothes, watching the building 2 doors down. It's the middle of the building now. The ground floor windows are orange, smoke pouring from every gap. The sound of it is something you hadn't expected. Fire has a sound, a deep crackling roar underneath the sharper sounds of glass breaking and wood spitting, a voice of its own. People are at the windows of the burning building. 3, 4, you can see the shapes against the orange light. They're still in there, someone says to your left. Not a cry, just a statement of fact that hangs in the cold air over the street. Then two of the shapes at the windows are gone, jumped from the first floor onto the street below where a group of men have positioned themselves to catch what they can. The catching is imperfect. You hear the sound of it, and one of the shapes lands awkwardly and is on the ground, and there are people around them immediately. The third shape at the window, higher up, second floor. The fire is below her. You can tell it's a woman by the shape, by the dress. And the smoke is thick around her, and the window frame is the only available exit. And the drop from the second floor to the street is 15 feet. The street is quiet in the specific way that people go quiet when they're watching something they cannot affect. You are watching this. You are watching this from 30 feet away, with Thomas on your left and Mrs. Hannigan on your right, the cold of November still present, the heat of the fire reaching you at 30 feet in waves, the smell of burning building everywhere. The woman at the window looks at the street below, looks back into the room, looks at the street. A man comes through the crowd, large, the kind of large that belongs to physical labour with the hands to match. He positions himself below her window. "Jump," he says. Not shouted, said, clearly and directly, in the tone of a man giving an instruction to someone who needs an instruction more than they need a choice. She jumps. He catches what he can. They both go down. The street is around them instantly. You move without deciding to, along with everyone else, and in the circle of people forming around them you see, she's alive, she's breathing, she has a cut on her forehead from something, and her dress is smouldering at the hem, and someone is already dealing with the hem, beating it out with their hands. She's alive. The third shape, there was a third shape higher up, is no longer visible at any window. The fire engine arrives 20 minutes later. 2 horses, a pump, a crew of men who move with the specific efficiency of people who have done this before and know exactly how much they can do and how much they cannot. They establish a water line from the pump at the corner. They work the near side of the fire, trying to prevent it spreading to the buildings on either side, which is the calculation in a street like this. You save the street, not the burning building, because the burning building is already gone. The burning building is already gone. It is 4:30 in the morning. You stand in the street with Thomas and Mrs. Hannigan, and the entire population of 3 buildings in Flower and Dean Street, and watch the fire do what fire does when it has a building to itself, and the fire engine does what it can. And the street is warm on this side from the fire in a way that, in any other context, would be a relief on a November night. Nobody says this. By 6 in the morning, the fire is out. Out, but the building is a shell. The walls are standing. Victorian brick doesn't fall as easily as the wooden frame inside, but the interior is gone, collapsed into the basement, the characteristic smell of wet burned wood rising from it in pale smoke. Everyone who was inside got out. This is the miracle, small but absolute. Everyone got out. The woman from the second floor is sitting on the step of your building with a blanket around her shoulders and a bandage on her forehead, applied by a woman from the 4th floor who used to be a nurse before she became something else, which is its own kind of Whitechapel story. Her name, you learn, is Margaret. She's 30. She lived in that building for 4 years. She looks at the shell of it. She doesn't cry. She has the specific face of someone who has been pushed past the point where crying is a functional response and is operating on something more basic, more continuous. You sit beside her on the step, not because you know what to say, because she's on your step and sitting is better than standing. After a moment, she says, "I had everything in there." "I know." Another moment. "I've got nothing now." "You've got out." She looks at you. There's something in her expression that is almost a question. Whether this counts, whether getting out is sufficient, whether having nothing but your life is enough to organise a response around. You don't answer the question because it doesn't have an answer, or not one that's useful right now. You sit on the step with her in the early morning cold and watch the smoke rise from the shell of the building 2 doors down. By 7, the neighbourhood has organised itself around Margaret and the 30-odd other people who have nowhere to sleep. Not through any official channel. There is no official channel, not really, not for people, on Flower and Dean Street at 7 in the morning after a fire. Through the same mechanisms that run everything in this neighbourhood. Through proximity and shared circumstances, and the specific knowledge of what it costs to have nowhere to sleep in November. Mrs. Hannigan gives Margaret her corner for the night, which means Mrs. Hannigan sleeps on the mattress with you and Thomas, which is crowded and uncomfortable, and which Mrs. Hannigan manages with the dignity of someone who has managed worse. 3 other families from the building 2 doors down are taken in by various residents of yours in the neighbouring building. The arrangements are imperfect and temporary, and made without paperwork or ceremony. This is the other city. Not the gin shops, not the crime, not the degradation that the reformers document. The other thing. The way people who live press together against a set of conditions that are always 1 degree from catastrophe learn to absorb a catastrophe when it comes. It doesn't make the conditions all right. It doesn't balance the ledger, but it is real, and it is present, and it is the thing that the ledger doesn't record. The weeks after the fire pass in the particular way that the cold weeks of winter pass in Whitechapel, one after another, each one the same length and weight, each one adding to the accumulated body of what has been endured. December comes. The coal question resolves itself partially in the way that problems like this resolve, not through being solved but through being navigated. You take the Saturday half shift. 9p more a week. Thomas starts the cabinet maker's apprenticeship in January. Mr. Riley writes the letter. Mrs. Hannigan vouches. The cabinet maker, a Mr. Garvey on Bethnal Green Road, takes him on. And the 2 shillings a week is indeed tighter, but the 2 shillings is consistent, and consistent money is a different kind of money from irregular money. Consistent money can be planned around, irregular money cannot. This is a thing that is easier to understand once you've had both. The frost comes in January, real frost, the kind that freezes the pump at the end of the street and means you're boiling water from the barrel in the yard, which is not clean, but is better than nothing, and the kind that makes the walk to the factory a genuine ordeal. The cold entering through every gap and seam of your clothes and finding the places where the coat thins and the shawl ends. But you have coal, proper coal, not slack. Seconds from the coal merchant who remembers you, or appears to, and fills the sack to £16 again without mentioning it. You keep more back now, the way the old woman at the bakery wall told you to. A reserve, small but real, a stone of coal kept back from each delivery for the moment the delivery is late or the money is short. The reserve means something, not in financial terms. A stone of coal is 4p, and 4p is not the thing that determines your life, but as a practice, as a habit, keeping something back, having a margin, however small. This is what you learn, that winter, in the room on Flower and Dean Street. Not a lesson anyone teaches you. Not something the factory or the landlord or the city provides. Something you work out for yourself, by the specific method of living close enough to the edge to understand what the edge is. The margin between the edge and where you are can be very small. It can be a stone of coal. It can be the corner of a pie in a cold factory yard. It can be the body warmth of two people on a thin mattress in a room with no coal. But it's there, and it's yours. One Sunday in February, a clear day, the sky, the specific pale blue of winter light that comes only when the coal smoke is blown east by a westerly wind. You leave the building on Flower and Dean Street at 9 in the morning and walk south. South through Whitechapel, through Aldgate, along the edge of the city, the financial city, the square mile, the place that decides what everything in this country is worth, and across London Bridge. London Bridge in 1867 is not the medieval structure crammed with houses that the earlier bridge was. That bridge was demolished in 1831. This bridge is new, relatively, opened in 1831, designed by John Rennie, stone, 5 arches, 828 feet long. It is, by Victorian standards, a functional and fairly handsome bridge. Not spectacular, not picturesque, but solid and wide and carrying, at this hour on a Sunday morning, a steady stream of people. You walk across it. The Thames below is grey-green in the winter light, wide and moving, the tide going out. The south shore is visible. Southwark, the Aros, the church spires and warehouse rooftops. To your right, looking east, you can see the masts of the ships at the Pool of London, the great anchorage where the ocean-going vessels wait their turn at the docks, dozens of them, their masts making a forest against the winter sky. You stop in the middle of the bridge. This is not something you planned. You just stop. The city spreads out around you on both sides of the river. To the north, the great dome of St. Paul's, Wren's Cathedral, completed in 1711, rising above the rooftops, the most recognisable shape on the London skyline, and still, after 150 years, the thing your eye goes to first. The morning light is on the stone of the dome, and the stone is warm against the pale sky. To the west, upstream, the towers of Westminster, Parliament, its new building only a few decades old, the Gothic tower rising over the river bend. Below you, the Thames itself, a working river even on Sunday, coal barges, lighters, a steam tug pulling 2 loaded barges against the tide, the tug's funnel trailing a line of black smoke, and everywhere, the city, in every direction, as far as you can see. You have been in London for 3 years and you have not stood on a bridge before. You have not been to this part of the city before. You've been east, the factory, the docks, and north to the market, and across to Bethnal Green and Mile End, but not here, not south of the river, not on a bridge looking at all of it at once. The scale of it. You know London is the largest city in the world. You've known this since before you came here. But knowing is different from seeing. Seeing it from a bridge, with the river beneath you and the city extending in every direction to the edge of visibility and beyond. This is a different kind of knowing. 1 million people. Actually more, 2.5 million by the last census. 2.5 million people living and working and sleeping and dying in this accumulation of brick and stone and smoke, this specific version of human density that has never existed anywhere before in quite this form. You are one of them. From this bridge, right now, looking at the city, you are as invisible as any single person in any city has ever been. You are Mary from a village outside Sligo, 19 years old, a dipping girl at Bryant and Mays, resident of Flower and Dean Street. You have a brother and a cold room and 5p in your pocket, and a stone of coal kept back as a reserve. The city doesn't know about any of this, but you know about the city. 3 years of it. The streets, and the smells, and the cold, and the factory, and the fires, and the way people share the corner of a pie, and take in strangers when their building burns. You know the city the way you know your own hands, imperfectly from the inside, with the knowledge that is practical before it is anything else. And from here, from this bridge, in this light, on this particular Sunday in February 1867, the city that has been trying to grind you down for 3 years is briefly, just for this moment, something else. Just extraordinary. The dome of St. Paul's catching the morning light, the ships below, the smoke rising from 1,000 chimneys, the endless, indifferent, brutal, extraordinary fact of all these lives. You stand on London Bridge for 10 minutes, maybe 15. Then you turn and walk back north, back across the bridge, back toward Whitechapel, back toward the room, and Thomas and Mrs. Hannigan, and the Monday morning, and the factory, and the 6 shillings, and the arithmetic. But you take something with you, not a conclusion, not an answer, just the view, the knowledge of the view, the fact that it's there, available, free, to anyone willing to walk to the bridge on a clear Sunday in winter. That's something. That's enough. The coal reserve. Let me come back to the coal reserve. Because this is the thing about the stone of coal kept back. It isn't insurance against cold. It isn't practical household management, though it is both of those things. It is the practice of believing that there will be a later. When the coal runs out, and it will run out again, this is not a problem that is solved, it is a problem that is managed. When it runs out again, there will be a stone in reserve. That stone is a physical argument against the specific despair of the arithmetic that never comes out, which is the despair of living as if this week is all there is and all there will be. The stone in reserve says, there is a next week. You put it there, you kept it back. When the temptation was to use it now, you decided that later would need it more than now does, and you held the line. This is what the old woman at the bakery wall was telling you, standing in the cold at 3 a.m. with her back against the warm brick. Not a practical tip, a survival philosophy. Keep something back, don't burn everything now. Later comes, it always comes. Spring comes slowly to Whitechapel, not with the drama of spring in the countryside, the bluebells, the new green, the birds, but with a series of small incremental moderations. The cold loosens its grip one degree at a time. The light changes first, coming earlier and staying later. This sky through the filmed window showing a slightly different quality of grey. Then the temperature changes, the mornings becoming merely cold rather than painful, the afternoons occasionally almost warm. The pump on the street stops freezing overnight. This is the sign, the reliable sign, that winter is done. By March, the room is different in the mornings. Not warm, never warm. Warmth in this room is a product of the fire, not the season, but not the active cold of winter. The floor is bearable on bare feet. The washing water doesn't have the skin of ice at the edges. Thomas comes home one Thursday in March with his face doing the thing it does when something good has happened that he hasn't told you yet. Mr. Garvey showed me the dovetail joint today, he says, putting down his coat. You know enough about cabinetry now to know what this means. The dovetail joint is the foundation of fine woodwork. The interlocking wedge-shaped cuts that join 2 pieces of wood with the strength that is more than the sum of the glue and the fit, a structural elegance that makes the joint itself a kind of argument about how to hold things together. Did you get it right? Third try, he says. He said that was fast. It is fast. He sits on the floor and examines his hands. They look different from the hands that were writing uncertain letters in pencil 4 months ago. There are calluses now, specific to the work, on the pads of his fingers from the chisel, at the base of his right thumb from the mallet. The hands are becoming what the work makes them. You did the right thing, you say, the apprenticeship. He looks up at you. We did the right thing, he says. You could have said no. I could have. Why didn't you? You think about this. Why didn't you? The arithmetic said to say no. The 2 shillings versus the market work. The tighter months, the managed shortfall. Because this tight part doesn't last forever, you say. He nods. Then he picks up the pencil stub from the floor and goes back to his letters. Let me tell you where you are now, in the spring of 1867. 3 years and some months into London, still on Flower and Dean Street. The room that is yours in the specific way that tenancy makes things yours. Still at Bryant and May's, still at the dipping bench, still 6 shillings a week. The risks are the same. The arithmetic is slightly better. Not good, but slightly better. The way things become slightly better when you've stopped making the worst decisions and started making the less bad ones. Mrs. Hannigan is still in the corner. Margaret, the woman from the fire, has found a room on Thrall Street and comes by on Sundays sometimes, and she and Mrs. Hannigan talk in the way that 2 older Irish women talk when they share the specific experience of having survived more than most people think is survivable. Thomas's hands are becoming a cabinet maker's hands. The coal reserve sits in the corner by the brazier, never quite full, never quite gone, maintained in that careful balance between having too little and using too much. Outside, the city continues. The great sewers that Bazalgette is building beneath the streets. You don't see them. Nobody on Flower and Dean Street sees them. But somewhere under you the work is happening, brick by brick, the slow Victorian project of making the city livable for the people who live in it. Not finished yet, not for years, but being built. The factories are building too. Not for you, not in your interest, but building. The industrial economy adding to itself, new products, new processes, new ways to produce the things that the city consumes. Bryant and May's will, in 20 years, face a strike. The match girls, girls like you, women like Ellen, Irish women and English women working at the dipping benches, will walk out, will refuse to work, will make the case, publicly, specifically, with the help of a woman named Annie Besant who will come to East London and listen to what the workers say, and write it down and publish it and make it known that the conditions are what they are and the pay is what it is and the phossy jaw is what it is. The strike will win, not everything, not immediately, not perfectly, but wages will go up and working conditions will improve and the white phosphorus will eventually be replaced by something safer. It will take longer than it should. It will require more suffering than it should have required. The women who make it happen will do so at personal cost, the way all change costs the people who make it. You won't be there. You'll be done with Bryant and May's before the strike. Thomas's trade will mean 2 real wages, and you'll have options that you don't have now, and you'll take them. But the women who strike are women exactly like you. They are you. In the version of this story where you stay another 20 years, they are the women of Flower and Dean Street and Thrall Street and Commercial Road, the women who do the arithmetic and find it always comes up short, and decide that the problem is not in their arithmetic, but in the numbers they've been given to work with. They walk out, they win. You don't know this yet in the spring of 1867, but it's coming. The last evening. Not the last evening of your life in Whitechapel. You'll be here for years yet. But the last evening of the coal run-out evening, which is what we started with and what we come back to. It's a Thursday, late November, a year after the coal ran out the first time. The weather has turned again. The cold is back. The first real cold of the winter. The kind that comes in November and stays through March. The kind that used to mean the coal running out and the arithmetic failing, and the walk through the dark streets at 2 a.m. with your hands going numb. You come home from the factory. Thomas is home. Mrs. Hannigan is in her corner. You check the coal. The stone you kept back from the last delivery is there, plus the delivery from last week, which is the proper second's coal, not slack, plus the small additional amount you bought on Saturday with the 9p from the half shift. The brazier is already lit. Thomas lit it when he came home from Mr. Garvey's workshop, because he's learned the morning kindling routine and applies it in the evenings now without being asked. The room is warm, not dramatically warm, not the warmth of a house where warmth is assumed, just the earned warmth of a fire in a small room in winter, in a building on Flower and Dean Street, in Whitechapel, in London, in 1867. You hang up your coat, you sit on the mattress, you pull off your boots, the familiar relief of it, and tuck your feet up beside you. Tea? Thomas says. Yes. You hear the kettle being settled on the trivet, the small sounds of evening, Mrs. Hannigan's rosary, a cart on the street below, the fire in the brazier, doing its specific small work. You look at your hands in your lap, the hands that have done 6,000 dipping motions today and will do 6,000 tomorrow and the day after, the hands with the calluses and the staining, and the small specific geography of a life that is lived close to the materials of the world. These hands will do other things eventually, not forever at the bench, but for now, for this year, for this winter. This is what there is, and you've made something with it. A room, a reserve, a brother who is learning a trade, something to eat, something to burn. Walls around you, thin but real. You think about the girl who walked out into the street at 2 a.m. last November because the room was cold and the arithmetic had stopped coming out and lying still felt impossible. You think about Tom, the rag and bone man with his fire in the iron pot and his missing finger. The old woman at the bakery wall, keep more back, don't, burn it all now. Ellen and the corner of the pie, the stone in the corner of the room. You close your eyes. Outside, Flower and Dean Street is doing what it always does. The sounds of it come up through the window, not intrusively, just present. The city sounds. The breathing of the city that never quite stops. Thomas puts the tea beside you. You don't open your eyes. You hear him settle on the floor with his letters or his pencil or whatever he's working on tonight. The small sound of him being 16 and making something. This is the room. This is the evening. This is the small, specific life that has been built here out of the materials available. 6 shillings a week, a thin mattress, a stone of coal kept back. It is not enough. It was never going to be enough, not in the sense of solving the problem, not in the sense of becoming comfortable, not in the sense of the arithmetic coming out the way it should. The arithmetic doesn't come out. That's not a failure of the arithmetic. That's the arithmetic working exactly as the people who designed it intended, but it's also not nothing. It is a warm room in November, tea in a chipped enamel cup, the sound of a 16-year-old learning his trade. the knowledge that the coal reserve is there, in the corner, waiting for the moment when it's needed. It is the life that was possible. You take what's possible and you make it yours, and you hold it carefully against the cold. Centuries will pass. Flower and Dean Street will be demolished. The slum clearances of the 1880s will take it, and then the Blitz will finish what remained, and then the post-war building programs will raise something different on the same ground. The street itself will vanish from the map, absorbed into the larger geography of a Whitechapel that keeps remaking itself over and over, generation by generation. Bryant and Mays will close. The factory in Bow will become flats. Bryant and Mays Matchmaker's Wharf they'll call the development, with a small plaque acknowledging the history, which is the way of places that have done something that history decided mattered. The Thames will be cleaned, the cholera will be beaten, the fog will end when the Clean Air Act of 1956 makes the burning of coal in domestic hearths illegal, and London will see its own sky properly for the first time in 2 centuries. But people will still live in East London, still walk these streets, still do the arithmetic of rent and food and heat and what's possible. The numbers will be different, the buildings will be different, the work will be different, the cold in November won't be different. And somewhere in East London, on a cold November night, someone will be lying awake in a room that is not quite warm enough, running an arithmetic that doesn't quite come out, deciding whether to go outside and walk until the arithmetic stops looping. Some things don't change. The cold doesn't change. The arithmetic doesn't change. And the stone kept back, the small reserve, the margin, the thing you hold against the worst, that doesn't change either. Someone is keeping a stone back right now, tonight, in whatever form it takes in their version of November. You know this without knowing it. You know it the way you know the cold, from the inside, from necessity, from the specific education of a life lived close to the edge. So, let it go now. The arithmetic stops, just for tonight, just for these hours. Let the room be warm enough. Let the tea be strong enough. Let the blanket be enough to reach from here to sleep. You've done today's 10 hours. You've carried today's weight. You've made the fire catch and kept the cold back and got through the afternoon and come home. That's what today asked of you. You gave it. Now let the sounds of the street below become part of the background, not gone, just below the level that requires your attention. Let the fire in the brazier do its small work without supervision. Let Thomas's breathing, slow and steady beside you, mark the rhythm of a room that is at rest. You are warm enough, tired enough, here enough. The city breathes outside. November breathes its cold against the window. The stone in the corner is enough for tomorrow. And tomorrow is not yet. Right now is just this. The room, the warmth, the earned quiet of an evening after a long day. Let it be enough. Let it be enough. Let it be enough. And sleep. Good night.